Day 10 of Oscar Pistorius' trial in the North Gauteng High Court has just adjourned for lunch, and we're joined by our special correspondent Sipho to tell us what's happened during the day. Hi, Sipho.
Hi.
Sipho, Colonel van Rensburg is still on the stand. What has he spoken about today?
So, Colonel Skumbi van Rensburg was the police captain at the station that would have been overlooking the Silverwoods estate where Oscar Pistorius lived. And on the morning that Reeva Steenkamp was shot, he was one of the very first people to respond to the call. So, like we've been hearing him giving testimony, basically being led by the state, he's now been cross-examined by the defense. They're going over some of the things that he said. They've established some pretty disturbing things that happened at the scene. And I don't mean that the blood that we saw on the screens. I'm talking about the fact that it would appear that in doing their police work, some of the police officers managed to steal some of Oscar Pistorius' property. Some of them weren't protecting themselves properly. They didn't gather the evidence properly. So these are things that the defense is sort of clutching onto. They're leaping onto that to try and show that there was incompetency on the part of the police when they did their work.
But what happens if it is proved that the police were incompetent? Can that evidence be chucked out?
Well, we wait to see just how much damage the defense can do to this evidence. But what usually happens in this case is that the court has to decide to what extent can the evidence then be discounted. Because you have to remember, obviously, that a lot of what went wrong about the police work is not disputed at all. It is not disputed that Oscar Pistorius shot Reeva Steenkamp. It is not disputed that he did it in an upstairs toilet. He then carried her body downstairs, and that's where the police found her. It is not disputed that he bashed through the door with a cricket bat. So there's really, it's a bit difficult to say at this point in time just how much damage this will be. But I think if we must talk about damage, we must talk about damage to the reputation of the South African police service. We must talk about what it looks like when even in a high-profile case, you've got instances of forensic investigators touching guns on the scene with their hands. You had the investigator literally, maneuvering the hammer on the gun. I don't know if you know how a gun works, but if you do that, you're essentially pulling the trigger. And if you remember from Darren Fresco's testimony about his own gun, which is completely different to Oscar's one that Oscar owns, the reason why the shot went off is because Oscar could not understand how to handle the weapon at the point of cocking it. So it's not hard to imagine that one of the investigators might have set off a shot inside Oscar Pistorius' house by mistake. So we're looking here at bargain basement incompetency, and it's really worrying as far as the reputation of the police is concerned.
Especially when we consider the entire world is watching this case. It's not just South Africans.
Yes, and that's what seems to worry me, that you might expect that if the police are going to make mistakes and if they're going to completely mess up an investigation, they might do it in a case that will not attract the video cameras, that will not attract the kind of coverage that we're doing. But this was a case from the very first day. They knew that there was going to be massive media scrutiny, and they seemed to screw it up anyways. It's really worrying.
Now, Sipho, we're heading into the second week, or at least we're completing the second week of Oscar Pistorius' trial. It was scheduled to go for 3 weeks. That's not going to happen. So what are your thoughts on the last 2 weeks?
Well, it's been the beginning, really. We've known from the start that the state might call hundreds of witnesses, and in the state and the defense, we could have sat here and discussed for a very long time what happened that night and what all the implications are. We do know that the court will adjourn from the 4th to the 11th of April. We'll have to see after the 11th how it goes after that. But it could go both ways as far as I'm concerned at this point in time. It could be that the state quickly wraps up all the evidence and we're done quickly. There's only so many times you can call a neighbor to say they heard screams at night before we can establish that, hey, they were screaming at night, and it depends, I guess, on how much the defense wants to challenge this and how much the defense wants to call its own expert witnesses, because we've heard Barry say so many times they're going to call their own forensic experts, they're going to call their own pathologists, they're going to call their own material analysts. So if they do all of that, it could be that the last 2 weeks could literally happen all over again, but from the perspective of the defense. So at this point in time, I can't really tell you how long it's going to be, but I don't think it's going to be 3 weeks. It's going to be much longer than that.
Sipho Hlongwane, thank you for joining us. And for the latest news and information on Oscar Pistorius, go to news24.com and don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook.